I kind of feel like I know you a little bit, having immersed myself in your songs and your lyrics and that kind of thing. But it's a pleasure to speak with you. Thanks for taking the time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. And I hope to be that kind of songwriter. I feel like I am. Like, I mean, the songs are intimately, excruciatingly personal. So hopefully, who I actually am comes across.
I think it does. Uh, Maybe someday we'll get to know each other very well, and be able to confirm that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So you guys have been doing your thing as Frontier Ruckus for about 20 years now, right? And
I mean, yeah, Davey and I, started as high school students at Brother Rice, which is an all-male Catholic high school here in the Detroit suburbs.
mhm,
And he just happened to play the banjo. This was like before the banjo wave of the 2010s. This was like 2002 or three.
mhm,
His dad was from like the South. He grew up in Georgia, so he just like kind of had that in his familial genealogy.
mhm,
And I just coincidentally was getting into bluegrass via like I was getting into country through like Neil Young Harvest. Like I was like raised on Bob Dylan and Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, and like they all kind of had their country periods, like Nashville
yes.
Skyline for Dylan. So like banjo was like on my radar, and when I met Davey, it was just like off to the races because he was so proficient. He'd been taking lessons since he was a little kid, so we just started jamming on folky bluegrass kind of tunes, and I started writing my own songs. And I went to Michigan State, and he went to U of M. At Michigan State in like 2006, I met Zach Nichols, who was already an amazing trumpet player, melodica. He played like these weird instruments that I had been looking for, like musical saw and melodica. He just happened to play like all of them. So he was like the Swiss Army knife in our band. And I also met Anna Birch, who provided us beautiful harmonies for many records and then went off to have a successful solo career. And I graduated from Michigan State in 2008. And then at that point, our first record was out. And we got a booking agent and basically toured for the next 10 years. Um, and then I, right around 2019, I like met the love of my life and wanted to settle down and tour less. So I sold my soul and started life as an advertising creative, writing car commercials. And it was right before the pandemic, and it's like the most fortuitous thing I ever did because it provided me a steady income that I could work from home when all my other musician friends, unfortunately, were like really struggling. Um, and that I put out a couple solo records during the pandemic, and this Ruckus record, our sixth, is really a pandemic record that we really took our time with over the past 5 years, and that pretty much brings us up to present date.
Right. Quick snapshot there. Yeah. So the aesthetic of Frontier Ruckus on Orion Songbook was sort of, more banjo heavy, more folk, a little bit hardcore folk, I guess, if you want to put it that way. So how has the Frontier Ruckus aesthetic changed over the 20 years that you've been together?
It's kind of the one of the things we love about this new record on the Northline is like it was an accidental full circle, like aesthetically, or just to the core DNA of Frontier Ruckus because we recorded like intimately with bleed and like the Orient Songbook had this beautiful naivete to it. We didn't know what we were doing, and for some reason, it's a lot of people's favorite record because it has that ungarnished, just you know, raw, unembellished honesty to it. So this new record, there's no electric guitars. It's all back to just acoustic guitar, banjo, just the primal elements that make us who we are. In between, we released Dead Malls and Nightfalls. Still had that folky element, but it got a little more rocky, folk rock maybe. And then by Eternity of Dimming, other influences were starting to enter, like the '90s alt rock that I grew up, like these environmental things that like that record, Eternity Dimming, was really a deep dive into the nostalgia of my psyche being a '90s kid, and like power pop elements and catchier choruses, and Sitcom Afterlife went into that even more. I really went off at this like kind of like power pop tangent because I love that kind of music too, like Teenage Fan Club, all the stuff that was influenced by the Byrds and just jangly kind of 12-string guitars and stuff. Enter the Kingdom was like our Nashville record. We recorded it in Nashville with Ken Coomer, who was like the original drummer for Uncle
Or Wilco.
Tupelo and Wilco.
Mhm.
That one has a bit more polish to it, like a string quartet.
It's
But now,
beautiful.
yeah, thanks. And so now we kind of stripped away all of those caprices, and we're back to just being who we are. With, I mean, the songs, the songwriting process and the primacy of like just serving the song. Hopefully, was always at the forefront. And the lyrics, I think, are always kind of the most important thing because we're so lyrically dense and
Mhm,
lyrically heavy. That never really changed. Just like how we, what kind of ornaments we placed upon it as we went.
mhm. Yeah, cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about the new record. I've only heard the two tunes that you've released so far, um, but I really dig them. I really like On the Northline, and watching the video, I get this feeling I could just wander down from our place on Lake Huron and pull up a chair and crack a couple of all day IPAs and just hang out. But then there's this business of a deal in the lyric. So what's going on with On the Northline there?
I I don't ever have the answers to those questions. Like, we have a song called $27 that with the refrains like, "You know what it's for,"
Right.
um, and I don't know what it's for. Like, I like building.
$2.
Yeah, I love building these mythologies and, like, baking in bits of mystique that I don't even know the answer to. I think good literature does that. I just kind of spin these stories with ambiguity built into them because I think it's interesting and uh, there's there's more of a depth of emotion in ambiguity than really spelling things out. So it's funny you say Lake Huron because like on the Northline references like the vague north places where like North Oakland County or like where the Metro Detroit grid kind of disperses back into a blurry, more rural landscape where
Mhm.
I can just have fun with these like kind of dreary domestic characters with sinister or nefarious enterprises. I just have I enjoy like kind of I don't know like an underbelly of like I've always like David Lynch like I love investigating this like underbelly to suburbia. Um, things that seem idyllic on the surface, but like investigating the more uh, I don't know the uglier side underneath.
Yeah.
Um, And so the two singles, On the North Line is very much like classic Frontier Ruckus. We actually consider it like a sequel to an earlier song called Dealerships, very minor key, rapid fire lyrics. Clarkson Pasture is like I think actually the song on the record that's most still in that lineage of like power pop. It's like catchier, almost like REM kind of major key elements. Um, we released those two first to show just kind of the classic dichotomy of Frontier Ruckus.
Yeah, I love that, the tension between the idyllic descriptions and then this deal that we're not sure, what the nature of that is. So I think that tension, really, draws me in. I love like my favorite character in Harry Potter is Snape because you don't know exactly where he's coming from.
My wife is the Harry Potter fan in the household, but it brings me to my wife is a really important fixture to this record, and because of her, there's this beautiful tension because like have that classic Frontier Ruckus angst to them,
Mhm,
and then songs like Mercury Sable or First Song for Lauren are just like the most unadulterated love songs I ever wrote. Just like thinking my
mhm.
lucky stars I met this person.
Yeah,
So
congratulations, by the way. That's
oh,
great.
thank you. I have my baby monitor here, but I just put my 10-month-old son down for a nap, so hopefully
All right.
he's getting tired, so hopefully we'll get
Congratulations. That's great.
thank you.
How exciting, yeah. And Clarkson Pasture, I like it as a love song because it's got this sort of languid feel of like a summer tube float, to the music. And then it's a really realistic love song. It's like, I'm thinking of you, and it's not too bad.
Yeah, well, the verses take place in the Michigan winter, and then the choruses escape into this, like, Michigan summer world. 'Cause once again, we're talking about dichotomies and polar opposites, like, there's few places more harsh than a Michigan winter, and there's few places more resplendent than a Michigan summer. Like that's why I love living here. It just represents the polarity of existence. So by the choruses, we've escaped to this like summer world of the meadows of outer Metro Detroit, and just cruising with the windows down and just feeling the totality of love's impact.
Great. A nice contrast there. Um, so I think I read you recorded in Ipsy. Is that correct? Ypsilanti?
Yeah, with a good friend named Ben Collins, same place, in just like his home studio, the same place where I recorded my two solo records, Alone at St. Hugo and Keego Harbor. Ben Collins is he's just a musical genius. Um, he somehow has both sides of being like the most consummate like player I've ever met, but also he has like a beautiful like technical scientific engineer mind. So we use like a Tascam, just like this vintage 8-track reel to reel quarter-inch tape machine that we dump into the computer from there. But just gives it this nice warmth in a really cozy, just all of us in a really tight knit space, like not worrying about bleed, just really authentic, kind of honest approach, and kind of a bedroom approach, really intimate.
Yeah, that's cool. I read where you said that when you recorded Orient Soundbook, you guys didn't know anything about recording, so you didn't know that there were rules to break. You just did what you wanted to do, and then you kind of tried to get back a little bit to that with this record, correct?
Now we know we're breaking them, but we don't really care. It comes to this point of like reaching your late 30s where you just kind of, there's a beautiful letting go of, I don't, some might call it laziness, but it's actually like a really healthy kind of letting go of just not letting perfect be the enemy of great kind of thing, and but just more capturing a feeling than a perfection or a product. Like it doesn't need to be a product; it just needs to encapsulate a feeling, and that's why people resonate with the Oregon Songbook, because it's just all feeling and very little perfection.
That's beautiful, man. It's inspiring. Um, you mentioned a little bit about the instrumentation that you guys started out with, and how do you guys approach instrumentation now? Because it really does set the mood for your songs, and it is really effective doing so.
Well, with Davey and Zach, I kind of give them carte blanche to do their thing. We're just kind of, that's a benefit of having been best friends with these guys for a couple of decades now, and having spent so much time on the road, and there's just kind of this telepathy built into it. I know they're going to serve the song. They're not going to try to fit too many, like they're not. Zach's not writing a trumpet part. He's writing an extension to my song. So it's like a very generous and loving kind of collaboration. And we were fortunate on this record to have a great rhythm section in Connor Dotson on drums and Evan Eklund on bass and harmonies. And I don't know, everyone just honors the song, and there's hardly any like conflicts or like don't do that or do this instead. It's just very sublimely natural.
Yeah, it has a real organic feel. I've been in the studio a little bit, and I get that vibe. Like, what does this song need? As opposed to, hey, I've got this thing I want to play.
Yeah, yeah. Or I just learned this riff. How do I fit it in?
Yeah, right, exactly. No, very cool. And you mentioned the harmonies. I really dig your voice. Um, and I really like the sympathetic, the complementary harmonies on so many of your recordings. There's an intimacy and a longing that's enhanced by harmony, I think, in your stuff. And you mentioned Anna Birch. So is she no longer singing with you, or?
No, she hasn't been since our last record. I mean, she, after Enter the Kingdom, she got a great record deal and released 2 amazing solo records. And then
Cool.
she since had 2 kids as well. So
All right.
we're all very busy with our domestic lives, and she's still my best friend. She lives in Detroit here, and we get our kids together all the time and see each other very frequently. But she had. I've never met someone with such a natural ear for harmony, and the harmonies that she lent to the Orient Songbook, Dead Malls, Eternity of Dimming, Enter the Kingdom, made those songs something so much more beautiful. I mean, she's such an integral part of the Frontier Ruckus story. Harmony is a magical device. Davey, like the songs that Davey sings harmony on, it's like a totally different element, and it's beautiful, and it's like has this like brotherly kind of ethos.
That sort of close harmony.
Yeah, harmony can do so much. It just changes the whole complexion of the feeling.
Oh, that's great. And you know, as a songwriter, I'm really fascinated by your craft. And your memory is such a defining characteristic of human beings, and I find your songs to be like intensely human. And it seems like you're tapping into this sort of shared human experience through the vehicle of your own very vivid and specific memories. Many of your songs sound like a David Sedaris essay to me, sort of put to music. I really dig that. I especially love the richness of the detail in your songs and all the local color. So, can you tell me a little bit about the role of place in your songwriting?
I mean, it's the most important thing. Like specificity, I say, my mantra is that the universal resides within the particular. It's like, and I learned this the first, like, the Orient Songbook was full of, it's named after a specific place, Orient Township in Michigan. It's
My
laced with
son's up there taking
I-75.
swimming lessons right now in Orient Township.
Most people around the country and the world would say Orion, but I gently correct them. But it's full of I-75 references, and someone put together like a Google map of all the Metro Detroit places I've referenced in songs, and you can't even like see the space between the pins. There's so many of them. The first time we went to play in London, I was singing these songs about these very specific Michigan places, and people in the front row were shouting lyrics back like right inches from my face, like with such enthusiasm. I'm like, why do you care about Lake Orion, Michigan? And they were like, you might as well have been singing about my own town here in England. It's like there's a translation that we're all capable of. I mean, that's why you can read any richly detailed book or poem and kind of translate it to your own emotional interiority. So that's the MO I've been operating with for my entire songwriting catalog. And for me, I write the songs for myself first and foremost. And every time I fit in one of those places, Keogh Harbor or Sylvan Lake, or these little obscure esoteric places, it's a trigger for me when I sing the song or when I think about it. It gives me some agency in this amorphous emotional pursuit of being alive. I don't know. I can map my emotional landscape onto this physical one, and it makes it more tangible and comprehensible to me. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
I've tried to articulate this for 20 years, and I've never gotten any better at it.
you just know.
That's why I write the songs, right? I mean, that's what the songs are for. So
Yeah, exactly. We can find the answers by immersing ourselves in the lyrics. But it is cool to hear references, all these references to the region where I grew up. It's Telegraph Road. I can almost like envision your drive from home to school,
yeah.
in the back of the minivan, or whatever.
We played a house show in Boston once, and this kid came up to me with a stack of Polaroids, and he without any context, and I started going through them, and it was like my dad's CVS, like up the street from our house, like my elementary school. He had like taken a Frontier Ruckus reality trip tour to all these places and like taking pictures with them. It was amazing.
Awesome, man.
But yeah, I mean, that's why we are kind of a Michigan band. I mean, the people that actually know the places I'm singing about, there's like this double. They don't even have to translate it. It's like just so literal.
Right.
So it's that, and that's cool too.
Yeah, that's definitely how I feel about it. So you studied with the poet Diane Wachowski, correct? Yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah. I got a whole stack of her books over here. The best.
I went to state as well and had classes with her, and
Oh, wow.
I moved to New York after I graduated, and the first place I went in the Village was this bookstore in St. Mark's, and it just so happened that she just had released a book, and they had a huge display in the front window of her stuff, and I was just in class with her a couple weeks ago. So she's brilliant, man. I love Diane. But and your lyrics are very much like poetry, but how would you say writing poetry is different from writing lyrics for songs?
That's it. I mean, Diane always used to be sure to differentiate. Like songs aren't poetry. Poetry is its own thing. God love her. I mean, I had my wife and I went to her place in East Lansing for dinner, like right before the pandemic, and she's still doing great. Still sharp as a tack. She's the best. But she taught me so much about like self mythology. I already had that tendency, but she really kind of encouraged it. This process of self mythology, and that's why. And with that comes ambiguity. That myth has the benefit of ambiguity. It doesn't have to be completely factual, but that's why myth is so much more poignant than fact. So much of the time, and songs and poems are both capable of that. I mean, obviously, songs have a whole different layer, a whole different dimension to benefit from. So I don't know. I wouldn't consider myself a great poet. Because I've definitely not spent as much time trying to hone that craft. It was definitely my focus in college, and Diane was definitely a fan of my work, and she was so encouraging. But I just, as
Great.
soon as I don't know, something about the guitar in my hands and like that added layer and tool to marry chord progressions and melody with the words I'm trying to say. It's kind of cheating in a way. You have you have more at your disposal. Like poetry's harder, I think, because I don't I don't know. Like the metrics for a good poem are kind of more nebulous. So you kind of have to really spend time cracking that equation.
Yeah, there's more freedom, I think, in the process of writing poetry and writing a song. You have to sort of conform to this, larger whole.
Yeah, I mean, songwriting is more of a pop medium. I mean, poetry was more pop in the 1890s, but there's a lot more popular considerations for songwriting.
Yeah, that's what the guy who was the chair of the English department when I was there was a gentleman named Victor Ponin, and he would always say that songwriters were the new poets of our age. Um,
Well,
and
Bob Dylan won the Nobel Prize to much controversy.
that's
um,
right.
I take less of a strict stance on it. I definitely think there's like undeniable poetic elements in the DNA of good songwriting. Um, so it's up for debate.
For sure. That's what makes it interesting and gives you, as a songwriter, a lot of opportunity to play around within these different styles, different traditions. And you do. I love it. I love
Thank you.
the way you craft your lyrics.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's an undeniable melancholia, I guess, that tends to pervade your work. But these are really wise and mature songs. Even Orion's songbook from when you were a younger man, still seemed the words of a older soul to me. So my question is, was the dread pirate Wesley right? Is life pain?
Well, I mean, of course, but it would be boring without it. um, Pain. I mean, like we were talking about polarities, and you need one thing to give the other thing definition or even existence, right? Um, Pain is beautiful. I mean, life is a endless bombardment of pain, but without it, you wouldn't grow whatsoever. The most painful moments of my life, at least, are the ones where out of which I grew the most and learned the most and found, resulted in the most beauty ultimately. So pain is a very momentary thing. Beauty is everlasting. I mean, that sounds like a platitude, but pain is the thing I think requires. I mean, the reason I've written so many songs, not about pain necessarily, but just like wistfulness or ache, just kind of this ineffable sadness. I mean, not. I mean, sadness gets a bad rap, but it's like a
Definitely.
beautiful. And I think it's the emotion that necessitates art the most. Art is there to work through it, to grant you catharsis. I mean, writing. I'm less prone to write a really happy song because I'm just busy being happy. Like I don't I don't need to work through it. I just want to be in the moment experiencing it. But that's why I am proud of like a song like Mercury Sable on this record because it is such a it came out of a sadness and a loneliness that had been in my life right leading up to meeting my wife. So that happiness is given such more. It's brought into sharp relief and given so much more poignancy. That to me is one of the most beautiful songs I've ever written, or just it means the most to me. And you can still sense the sadness in it. It's like someone released a pressure valve, and that's why the song literally makes reference to myself crying these tears of joy, which is almost like a diary entry, but like I didn't even care. It was just so honest.
I can't wait to hear it.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm sorry. I'll send you a link to the record right after this.
okay, that'd be
Keep
great.
forgetting it.
Yeah, and I see you guys are playing at the Loving Touch on February 17th, which is the day after the record drops. Is that sort of your release party?
Yeah, and I just realized Enter the Kingdom was released literally 7 years ago on February 18th. And
Wow.
it was like my third date with my wife. She came to that. That was right when we had met each other that month, and I left for a 3-month tour and got super emo about it. But that
Can
distance
imagine.
was when I was like, oh, I really miss this person. I think there's something here. Like I was crazy sad the whole tour, like in
Yeah.
these beautiful places in Europe, and I'm like, why am I depressed in Italy? This is so weird.
Oh, that's great, man. I mean, it's not great that you were sad, but
Yeah,
I mean, I've had that
but
experience prior to, phone cameras. I had like this one snapshot over, carried it all around Europe and cried myself to sleep every.
see, but
Yeah.
once again, sadness isn't necessarily bad. It's an
Right.
indication of something beautiful.
Yeah. So there's a longing in that context. All
Mhm.
right. Well, we're kind of winding down a little bit here, unfortunately. But we did mention CD a little bit at the top, and I did want to touch on format. As I mentioned, we're big believers in the CD format as sort of the last collectible physical format. Um, so as a recording artist, what are your thoughts on format? How do you feel like your career has been impacted by format and streaming and algorithms and that sort of thing?
Well, can I throw a question right back at you? Like, what do you love
Sure.
about CD?
Um, well, I mean, I love vinyl as well. I mean, I started collecting vinyl again in 2010. Um, and as the price of vinyl began to rise, I still had all these CDs, and I'm like, hmm. Plus, in my business, I was a representative of Philips Corporation for many years, selling compact disc technology. So I've got like that bias kind of built in. But I mean, I've done a lot of A/Bing of vinyl and CD, and I find there's a depth and a richness to uh, a well mastered CD that I don't get off of vinyl. Um, and I just think there, especially for like deluxe editions and box sets, it's the ideal format for that. And I just like the collectability of it. It's right now it's very cheap to buy, and I love the sound, and I'm also a little bit of a contrarian, so I'm kind of like, you know, I was
Yeah.
frisbeeing copies of For Those About to Rock and Duran Duran Rio down my buddy's street in Pontiac, and never thought that was going to be worth $25 at the record store. So I think CDs will have their second wave, their Indian summer at some point. May not be just like vinyl, but I think.
Well, I'm an elder millennial, so the first records I ever owned were on cassette tape. So that's why On the Northline is on cassette. This beautiful green
Okay.
cassette tape. Um,
Awesome.
but also, I'll be right back. I'm gonna grab the. I feel like I'm Letterman plugging my, and then we have it
All
on
right.
beautiful
Very
double
cool.
vinyl.
Yeah.
It's,
I know that
across from my
neighborhood, not specifically, but I know it.
that's my grandpa's neighborhood in Troy, Michigan.
All right on.
Yeah, in the 70s. My dad took all the photos in the 70s on this camera that I still have.
That's awesome.
But I've never listened to one of my records on vinyl and been like, oh my God, this is the definitive version. Like to me, vinyl is cool because it's a big object. It's physical. It just, you can see the artwork better. I'm not a crazy audiophile. I'm not like, I have a pretty good record player system. I don't think vinyl's the definitive like sound. CDs sound great. I mean, there's very little getting in the way there. It's pretty much the closest to the pure master. Streaming, I I don't even have like as delicate of an ear that I can like really. I don't get bummed out when I hear it on CD and then like on Spotify. I'm like, oh, so much is lost. Like the listener is not getting the full experience. I think streaming is fine. I'm not Neil Young trying to
I agree.
revolutionize. Is that what you think about streaming?
Yeah, I like the convenience of streaming, but there are people who are music consumers and there are people who are music collectors. You know,
Yeah, you
streaming.
can't collect a Spotify song. I mean,
No,
and feel the same kind of sense of ownership.
no, and I think we found in the MP3 era that you can't. That's not really a collection either. You're not going to sit there with a glass of fine porter like
Yeah.
perusing someone's playlists. Where you might with a vinyl collection.
So do you have like a really nice CD player? I mean, most people just don't have CD players. I just bought a
Yeah.
'97 Jaguar, which luckily has a CD in the trunk, like a six disc changer. So I'm excited to use that this summer. But other than that, I don't have a CD player.
Yeah, you're right. A lot of people don't, but yeah, I never got rid of mine in the same way I never got rid of my turntable. You know, it just kind of was always there, and just kind of hooked it up again and got out all these boxes of CDs. Um, but
Well,
yeah,
we will have this record on CD. Our wonderful European British label, Loose Music, is. I think I feel like in Europe or the UK, people still like CDs a little more than over here. So that our label, Loose Music, always puts it on CD, and I think we're going to get some copies available to our US audience as well.
cool. But you probably won't have any for sale at on the 17th, though.
I think we might. I think we will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'll look forward to grabbing one.
LP, cassette, and CD, and 8-track. No.
All right. Wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility.
That was before my time, but I wouldn't be surprised if that made a comeback.
I know a CD is probably more out of favor than 8-track, even.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, but I used to be in an acoustic duo with a guy, and this was in the mid '90s when cassette was, out of favor. And we'd be like, we got our tape for sale at the back table, and you can also enter to win a '83 Dodge Omni, so you'll have a tape player to play it on. So yeah, it's very similar. But cool, yeah. My wife and I are planning to come on the 17th. We live, not walking distance, but very close.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, so as we sort of wrap up here, I don't know, this question just kept coming to me. I went to Michigan State, and as a humanities student, I always kind of had this vague sense that I was in the wrong place. I started out like in business school because my dad told me that I had to, and figured I wasn't going to make it out alive if I kept on that track. So I switched to English, but I always had this vague sense that I should be somewhere else. Did you ever feel like you were in the wrong place when you're in East Lansing?
I mean, I did that like backwards. I had the most supportive parents who acknowledged the fact that I had some talent in the creative pursuits and like did nothing but support me the entire way. Like they're like, go for it. Every time I would leave on tour, my dad would like, don't come back until you're famous, kind of thing. And we never became famous enough that I could live. I mean, I lived as a professional musician for 15 years, but once you want to settle down a bit and have a family and raise kids, and I wound up like most people like start in a place where they feel like they don't belong in like a corporate career and then like break free. I started free, and then now I'm a senior creative on the Cadillac account. Like I write, like if you see a Cadillac commercial on television, I probably wrote it, kind of thing. But I'm extremely grateful for that too, and I still have fun doing. Like it's weirdly gratifying to do it at this point in my life, and I still get to make songs and records, and the songwriting is just so pure now. And I mean, it always was, but like, I'm not writing a song to, get a feature in Rolling Stone or like to go on tour, like all these like showbiz kind of considerations. I just get to make music and fill it with as many Metro Detroit references as possible, just for myself. So there's a real purity to it, and I'm immensely privileged and grateful for the way it kind of came together. And I'm a lucky guy.